Malnutrition or malnourishment is a condition that results from eating a diet in which nutrients are either not enough or are too much, such that the diet causes health problems. It may involve calories, protein, carbohydrates, vitamins or minerals. Not enough nutrients is called undernutrition or undernourishment, while too much is called overnutrition. Malnutrition is often used specifically to refer to undernutrition where there is not enough calories, protein, or micronutrients. If undernutrition occurs during pregnancy or before 2 years of age, it may result in permanent problems with physical and mental development. Extreme undernourishment, known as starvation, may have symptoms that include a short height, thin body, very poor energy levels, and swollen legs and abdomen. People also often get infections and are frequently cold. The symptoms of micronutrient deficiencies depend on the micronutrient that is lacking. Undernourishment is most often due to not enough high-quality food being available to eat. This is often related to high food prices and poverty. A lack of breastfeeding may contribute, as may a number of infectious diseases such as gastroenteritis, pneumonia, malaria, and measles, which increase nutrient requirements. There are two main types of undernutrition: protein energy malnutrition and dietary deficiencies. Protein energy malnutrition has two severe forms, marasmus and kwashiorkor. Common micronutrient deficiencies include a lack of iron, iodine, and vitamin A. During pregnancy, due to the body's increased need, deficiencies may become more common. In some developing countries, overnutrition in the form of obesity is beginning to present within the same communities as undernutrition. Other causes of malnutrition include anorexia nervosa and bariatric surgery. Efforts to improve nutrition are some of the most effective forms of development aid. Breastfeeding can reduce rates of malnutrition and death in children, and efforts to promote the practice increase the rates of breastfeeding. In young children, providing food between 6 months and 2 years of age improves outcomes. There is also good evidence supporting the supplementation of a number of micronutrients to women during pregnancy and among young children in the developing world. To get food to people who need it most, both delivering food and providing money so people can buy food within local markets are effective. Simply feeding students at school is insufficient. Management of severe malnutrition within the person's home with ready-to-use therapeutic foods is possible much of the time. In those who have severe malnutrition complicated by other health problems, treatment in a hospital setting is recommended. This often involves managing low blood sugar and body temperature, addressing dehydration, and gradual feeding. Routine antibiotics are usually recommended due to the high risk of infection. Longer-term measures include improving agricultural practices, reducing poverty, improving sanitation, and the empowerment of women. There were 793 million undernourished people in the world in 2015. This is a reduction of 216 million people since 1990, when 23% were undernourished. In 2012, it was estimated that another billion people had a lack of vitamins and minerals. In 2013, protein energy malnutrition was estimated to have resulted in 469,000 deaths, down from 510,000 deaths in 1990. Other nutritional deficiencies, which include iodine deficiency and iron deficiency anemia, result in another 84,000 deaths. In 2010, malnutrition was the cause of 1.4% of all disability-adjusted life years. About a third of deaths in children are believed to be due to undernutrition, although the deaths are rarely labeled as such. In 2010, it was estimated to have contributed contributed to about 1.5 million deaths in women and children, though some estimate the number may be greater than 3 million. An additional 165 million children were estimated to have stunted growth from malnutrition in 2013. Undernutrition is more common in developing countries. Certain groups have higher rates of undernutrition, including women, in particular while pregnant or breastfeeding, children under 5 years of age, and the elderly. In the elderly, undernutrition becomes more common due to physical, psychological, and social factors. Definitions. Unless specifically mentioned otherwise, the term malnutrition refers to undernutrition for the remainder of this article. Malnutrition can be divided in two different types, SAM and MAM. SAM refers to children with severe acute malnutrition. MAM refers to moderate acute malnutrition. Undernutrition and overnutrition. Malnutrition is caused by eating a diet in which nutrients are not enough or are too much such that it causes health problems. It is a category of diseases that includes undernutrition and overnutrition. Overnutrition can result in obesity and being overweight. In some developing countries, overnutrition in the form of obesity is beginning to present within the same communities as undernutrition. However, the term malnutrition is commonly used to refer to undernutrition only. This applies particularly to the context of development cooperation. Therefore, malnutrition, in documents by the World Health Organization, UNICEF, Save the Children or other international non-governmental organizations, usually is equated to undernutrition. Protein energy malnutrition. Undernutrition is sometimes used as a synonym of protein energy malnutrition, while others include both micronutrient deficiencies and protein energy malnutrition in its definition. It differs from calorie restriction in that calorie restriction may not result in negative health effects. The term hypoalimentation means underfeeding. The term severe malnutrition or severe undernutrition is often used to refer specifically to PEM. PEM is often associated with micronutrient deficiency. Two forms of PEM are kwashiorkor and marasmus, and they commonly coexist. Kwashiorkor is mainly caused by inadequate protein intake resulting in a low concentration of amino acids. The main symptoms are edema, wasting, liver enlargement, hypoalbuminemia, steatosis, and possibly depigmentation of skin and hair. Kwashiorkor is identified by swelling of the extremities and which is deceiving of actual nutritional status. Marasmus is caused by an inadequate intake of protein and energy. The main symptoms are severe wasting, leaving little or no edema, minimal subcutaneous fat, severe muscle wasting, and non-normal serum albumin levels. Marasmus can result from a sustained diet of inadequate energy and protein, and the metabolism adapts to prolong survival. It is traditionally seen in famine, significant food restriction, or more severe cases of anorexia. Conditions are characterized by extreme wasting of the muscles and a gaunt expression. Undernutrition, hunger. Undernutrition encompasses stunted growth, wasting, and deficiencies of essential vitamins and minerals. The term hunger, which describes a feeling of discomfort from not eating, has been used to describe undernutrition, especially in reference to food insecurity. Definition by Gomez. In 1956, Gomez and Galvin studied factors associated with death in a group of malnourished children in a hospital in Mexico City, Mexico, and defined categories of malnutrition: first, second, and third degree. The degrees were based on weight below a specified percentage of median weight for age. The risk of death increases with increasing degree of malnutrition. An adaptation of Gomez's original classification is still used today, while it provides a way to compare malnutrition within and between populations. The classification has been criticized for being arbitrary, and for not considering overweight as a form of malnutrition. Also, height alone may not be the best indicator of malnutrition. Children who are born prematurely may be considered short for their age even if they have good nutrition. Definition by Waterlow. John Conrad Waterlow established a new classification for malnutrition. Instead of using just weight for age measurements, the classification established by Waterlow combines weight for height with height for age to show the stunting that results from chronic malnutrition. One advantage of the Waterlow classification over the Gomez classification is that weight for height can be examined even if ages are not known. These classifications of malnutrition are commonly used with some modifications by WHO. Effects. Malnutrition increases the risk of infection and infectious disease, and moderate malnutrition weakens every part of the immune system. For example, it is a major risk factor in the onset of active tuberculosis. Protein and energy malnutrition and deficiencies of specific micronutrients increase susceptibility to infection. Malnutrition affects HIV transmission by increasing the risk of transmission from mother to child and also increasing replication of the virus. In communities or areas that lack access to safe drinking water, these additional health risks present a critical problem. Lower energy and impaired function of the brain also represent the downward spiral of malnutrition, as victims are less able to perform the tasks they need to in order to acquire food, earn an income, or gain an education. Vitamin deficiency-related diseases. Hypoglycemia can result from a child not eating for 4 to 6 hours. Hypoglycemia should be considered if there is lethargy, limpness, convulsion, or loss of consciousness. If blood sugar can be measured immediately and quickly, perform a finger or heel stick. Signs in those with malnutrition. Some of the signs of dehydration differ. Children, however, may still be interested in drinking, have decreased interactions with the world around them, have decreased urine output, and may be cool to touch. Cognitive development. Protein-calorie malnutrition can cause cognitive impairments. The human's critical period varies from the final third of gestation to the first 2 years of life. Iron deficiency anemia in children under 2 years of age likely affects brain function acutely and probably also chronically. Folate deficiency has been linked to neural tube defects. Malnutrition in the form of iodine deficiency is the most common preventable cause of mental impairment worldwide. Quote, even moderate deficiency, especially in pregnant women and infants, lowers intelligence by 10 to 15 IQ points, shaving incalculable potential off a nation's development. The most visible and severe effects, disabling goiters, cretinism and dwarfism, affect a tiny minority, usually in mountain villages. But 16% of the world's people have at least mild goiter, a swollen thyroid gland in the neck. Causes. Major causes of malnutrition include poverty and food prices, dietary practices and agricultural productivity, with many individual cases being a mixture of several factors. Clinical malnutrition, such as in cachexia, is a major burden also in developed countries. Various scales of analysis also have to be considered in order to determine the socio-political causes of malnutrition. For example, the population of a community may be at risk if the area lacks health-related services, but on a smaller scale certain households or individuals may be at even higher risk due to differences in income levels, access to land, or levels of education. Diseases. Malnutrition can be a consequence of health issues such as gastroenteritis, a chronic illness, especially the HIV/AIDS pandemic. Diarrhea and other infections can cause malnutrition through decreased nutrient absorption, decreased intake of food, increased metabolic requirements, and direct nutrient loss. Parasite infections, in particular intestinal worm infections, can also lead to malnutrition. A leading cause of diarrhea and intestinal worm infections in children in developing countries is lack of sanitation and hygiene. People may become malnourished due to abnormal nutrient loss or increased energy expenditure. Dietary practices. Undernutrition. A lack of adequate breastfeeding leads to malnutrition in infants and children, associated with the deaths of an estimated 1 million children annually. Illegal advertising of breast milk substitutes continues 3 decades after its 1981 prohibition under the WHO International Code of Marketing. Breast milk substitutes, deriving too much of one's diet from a single source, such as eating almost exclusively corn or rice, can cause malnutrition. This may either be from a lack of education about proper nutrition, or from only having access to a single food source. It is not just the total amount of calories that matters, but specific nutritional deficiencies such as vitamin A deficiency, iron deficiency, or zinc deficiency can also increase risk of death. Overnutrition. Overnutrition caused by overeating is also a form of malnutrition. In the United States, more than half of all adults are now overweight, a condition that, like hunger, increases susceptibility to disease and disability, reduces worker productivity, and lowers life expectancy. Overeating is much more common in the United States, where for the majority of people, access to food is not an issue. Many parts of the world have access to a surplus of non-nutritious food, in addition to increased sedentary lifestyles. Yale psychologist Kelly Brownell calls this a toxic food environment, where fat and sugar-laden foods have taken precedence over healthy, nutritious foods. The issue in these developed countries is choosing the right kind of food. More fast food is consumed per capita in the United States than in any other country. The reason for this mass consumption of fast food is its affordability and accessibility. Often fast food, low in cost and nutrition, is high in calories and heavily promoted. When these eating habits are combined with increasingly urbanized, automated, and more sedentary lifestyles, it becomes clear why weight gain is difficult to avoid. Not only does obesity occur in developed countries, problems are also occurring in developing countries in areas where income is on the rise. Overeating is also a problem in countries where hunger and poverty persist. In China, consumption of high-fat foods has increased while consumption of rice and other goods has decreased. Overeating leads to many diseases, such as heart disease and diabetes, that may result in death. Poverty and food prices in Bangladesh. Poor socio-economic position was associated with chronic malnutrition since it inhibits purchase of nutritious foods such as milk, meat, poultry, and fruits. As much as food shortages may be a contributing factor to malnutrition in countries with lack of technology, the FAO has estimated that 80% of malnourished children living in the developing world live in countries that produce food surpluses. The economist Amartya Sen observed that, in recent decades, famine has always been a problem of food distribution and/or poverty, as there has been sufficient food to feed the whole population of the world. He states that malnutrition and famine were more related to problems of food distribution and purchasing power. It is argued that commodity speculators are increasing the cost of food. As the real estate bubble in the United States was collapsing, it is said that trillions of dollars moved to invest in food and primary commodities, causing the 2007-2008 food price crisis. the use of biofuels as a replacement for traditional fuels and raises the price of food. The United Nations Special Rapporteur on the Right to Food, Jean Ziegler, proposes that agricultural waste, such as corn cobs and banana leaves, rather than crops themselves, be used as fuel. Agricultural productivity. Local food shortages can be caused by a lack of arable land, adverse weather, lower farming skills such as crop rotation, or by a lack of technology or resources needed for the higher yields found in modern agriculture, such as fertilizers, pesticides, irrigation, machinery and storage facilities. As a result of widespread poverty, farmers cannot afford, governments cannot provide the resources necessary to improve local yields. The World Bank and some wealthy donor countries also press nations that depend on aid to cut or eliminate subsidized agricultural inputs such as fertilizer, in the name of free market policies, even as the United States and Europe extensively subsidized their own farmers. Many, if not in most, farmers cannot afford fertilizer at in-market prices, leading to low agricultural production and wages and high, unaffordable food prices. Reasons for the unavailability of fertilizer include moves to stop supplying fertilizer on environmental grounds, cited as the obstacle to feeding Africa by the Green Revolution pioneers Norman Borlaug and Keith Rosenberg. Future threats. There are a number of potential disruptions to global food supply that could cause widespread malnutrition. Climate change is of importance to food security, with 95% of all malnourished peoples living in the relatively stable climate region of the subtropics and tropics. According to the latest IPCC reports, temperature increases in these regions are very likely. Even small changes in temperatures can lead to increased frequency of extreme weather conditions. Many of these have great impact on agricultural production and hence nutrition. For example, the 1998 to 2001 Central Asian drought brought about an 80% livestock loss and 50% reduction in wheat and barley crops in Iran. Similar figures were present in other nations. An increase in extreme weather such as drought in regions such as sub-Saharan Africa would have even greater consequences in terms of malnutrition. Even without an increase of extreme weather events, a simple increase in temperature reduces the productivity of many crop species, also decreasing food security in these regions. Colony collapse disorder is a phenomenon where bees die in large numbers. Since many agricultural crops worldwide are pollinated by bees, this represents a threat to the supply of food. An epidemic of wheat stem rust caused by race UG99 is currently spreading across Africa and into Asia, and, it is feared, could wipe out more than 80% of the world's wheat crops. Prevention. Food security. The effort to bring modern agricultural techniques found in the West, such as nitrogen fertilizers and pesticides, to Asia, called the Green Revolution, resulted in decreases in malnutrition similar to those seen earlier in Western nations. This was possible because of existing infrastructure and institutions that are in short supply in Africa, such as a system of roads or public seed companies that made seeds available. Investments in agriculture, such as subsidized fertilizers and seeds, increases food harvest and reduces food prices. For example, in the case of Malawi, almost 5 million of its 13 million people used to need emergency food aid. However, after the government changed policy and subsidies for fertilizer and seed were introduced against World Bank strictures, farmers produced record-breaking corn harvests as production leaped to 3.4 million in 2007 from 1.2 million in 2005, making Malawi a major food exporter. This lowered food prices and increased wages for farm workers. Such investments in agriculture are still needed in other African countries like the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The country has one of the highest prevalence of malnutrition even though it is blessed with great agricultural potential. John Olimwengu explains in his article for D+C. Proponents for investing in agriculture include Jeffrey Sachs, who has championed the idea that wealthy countries should invest in fertilizer and seed for Africa's farmers. New technology in agricultural production also has great potential to combat undernutrition. By improving agricultural yields, farmers could reduce poverty by increasing income as well as open up area for diversification of crops for household use. The World Bank itself claims to be part of the solution to malnutrition, asserting that the best way for countries to succeed in breaking the cycle of poverty and malnutrition is to build export-led economies that will give them the financial means to buy foodstuffs on the world market. Breastfeeding. As of 2016, it is estimated that about 821,000 deaths of children less than 5 years old could be prevented globally per year through more widespread breastfeeding. Fortified foods. Manufacturers are trying to fortify everyday foods with micronutrients that can be sold to consumers, such as wheat flour for beladi bread in Egypt, or fish sauce in Vietnam, and the iodization of salt. For example, flour has been fortified with iron, zinc, folic acid and other B vitamins such as thiamine, riboflavin, niacin and vitamin B12. World population. Restricting population size is a proposed solution. Thomas Malthus argued that population growth could be controlled by natural disasters and voluntary limits through moral restraint. Robert Chapman suggests that an intervention through government policies is a necessary ingredient of curtailing global population growth. However, there are many who believe that the world has more than enough resources to sustain its population. Instead, these theorists point to unequal distribution of resources and under- or unutilized arable land as the cause for malnutrition problems. For example, Amartya Sen advocates that, no matter how famine is caused, methods of breaking it call for a large supply of food in the public distribution system. This applies not only to organizing rationing and control, but also to undertaking work programs and other methods of increasing purchasing power for those hit by shifts in exchange entitlements in a general inflationary situation. Food sovereignty. One suggested policy framework to resolve access issues is termed food sovereignty, the right of peoples to define their own food, agriculture, livestock, and fisheries systems, in contrast to having food largely subjected to international market forces. Food First is one of the primary think tanks working to build support for food sovereignty. Neoliberals advocate for an increasing role of the free market. Health facilities. Another possible long-term solution would be to increase access to health facilities to rural parts of the world. These facilities could monitor undernourished children, act as supplemental food distribution centers, and provide education on dietary needs. These types of facilities have already proven very successful in countries such as Peru and Ghana. Global initiatives. In April 2012, the Food Assistance Convention was signed, the world's first legally binding international agreement on food aid. The May 2012 Copenhagen Consensus recommended that efforts to combat hunger and malnutrition should be the first priority for politicians and private sector philanthropists looking to maximize the effectiveness of aid spending. They put this ahead of other priorities, like the fight against malaria and AIDS. The main global policy to reduce hunger and poverty of the Sustainable Development Goals, in particular Goal 2, Zero Hunger, sets globally agreed targets to end hunger, achieve food security and improve nutrition and promote sustainable agriculture. The Partnership Compact 2025, led by IFPRI with the involvement of UN organizations, NGOs and private foundations, develops and disseminates evidence-based advice to politicians and other decision-makers aimed at ending hunger and undernutrition in the coming 10 years. By 2025, the Ending Hunger campaign is an online communication campaign aimed at raising awareness of the hunger problem. It has many worked through viral videos depicting celebrities voicing their anger about the large number of hungry people in the world. Another initiative focused on improving the hunger situation by improving nutrition is the Scaling Up Nutrition movement. Started in 2010, this movement of people from governments, civil society, the United Nations, donors, businesses and researchers, publishes a yearly progress report on the changes in the 55 partner countries.